This song's called These Cold Nights with flooded eyes. We warm our hands by blowing into them. And home is us, but wanderlust pulls me far. We're under the same stars, and I'm calling you from the station. So good night. Love won't die with goodbyes and distance. These dark days I've been away. I'm missing things, all the colors you would bring. It grows nearby, our raging eyes. I'm lost in time. I wonder if I cross your mind, and I'm calling you from the station. So good night. Love won't die with goodbyes and distance.
Good evening, and welcome to the Evening for the Environment. I'm Maureen Druin, Executive Director of Maine Conservation Alliance and Maine Conservation Voters. I want to begin by saying welcome to the virtual Evening for the Environment, and how about the Yoshima brothers? You guys were awesome. Woo!
Thank you very much.
You want to introduce yourself?
And I'm Adam Lee, Board President of Maine Conservation Voters, and I'd like to start by thanking our premier level sponsor, Bangor Savings Bank, and our champion sponsors, Down East Magazine, Lee Auto Malls, the Climate Initiative, and Elliottsville Foundation. We're joined here in the studio by the talented Oshima brothers, who were playing right before the show. It's really wonderful. Sean and Jamie, hey there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So, can you tell us the titles of the songs you were just playing?
Yeah, we played Lost at Sea and Colorblind, right?
And then These Cold Nights.
That's right.
That's great. Thank you. It was really wonderful. We look forward to chatting with you a little more further on.
Look forward to chatting with you.
And how about one more song? Would you guys be up for one more?
We would love to.
Okay, great.
9 Mile Kite.
We're the Oshima brothers.
Rain showers in September sun, her flower petal lips begun, showing all her teeth in rows. Toss your clothes and run outside. These sour apples overrun, devour yours and leave me none. Endless eyes of indigo, leave me standing here untied. She's a 9-mile kite, stitched with dynamite. Watch the clouds ignite and she'll dance in the storm. I called you to tell you that it's raining in Whitefield, and this loneliness I feel has been bringing me down. The twilight is coming, turning into the nighttime, and my eyes will be drying once I get on the road. You walk to the mirror, trying to see what's behind you, and I wanted to find you before the memories fade. I've checked all the back roads and I look by the ocean, but you're always in motion and you never come home.
Brothers.
While we wish we were together in person to celebrate tonight, we're glad you're joining us virtually, as we have lots to share. For those of you who'd like to participate in the interactive portion of the event online, pick up your smartphone and go to slido.com and enter the code EVENING. That's SLIDO.com and type the code EVENING.
And I want to take a moment to highlight that this event is being held on land that is the traditional territory of the Wabanaki Nations. The Wabanaki include the Passamaquoddy tribe, the Penobscot Nation, the Holton Band of Maliseet Indians, Aroostook Band of Micmacs, and the Abenaki. They have long protected the lands and waters of the place we now call Maine. We pause in remembrance of the lives and lands of the Wabanaki people that were taken through colonization, and we commit ourselves to working in partnership to restore the inherent sovereign rights of the Wabanaki Nations through legislation and other action. Now, Adam, we've worked together for a long time, you as MCV board president, me as executive director, and I'm really curious, what is one thing you like about the work that MCI and MCV does?
Maureen, I think I was probably first drawn to Maine Conservation Voters really for the work the organization's doing on tackling the climate crisis and just everything that goes with that. Mm-hmm. And you?
I really like that we work on voting rights and democracy in addition to environmental protection. That's what I like. And first up, for our first video, we have some friends that we asked that question to also. And here it is.
I've been involved with MCV since, well, indirectly for a long, long time, but I became a board member in 2013.
I've been supportive, along with my family, of Maine Conservation Voters and the Conservation Alliance for almost 20 years.
As a 5-term lawmaker, I've come to know Maine Conservation Voters Director of Government Affairs, Beth Ahern, rather well.
I sought out an internship with Maine Conservation Voters because I'm heading to grad school next year to study public policy, and I want to study environmental policy. So I wanted to get that background. And Maine Conservation Voters is a really interesting organization in getting that type of experience. They're doing the lobbying, they're doing research, they're doing work relating to voter rights, they're doing work related to racial equity tied to climate change.
We work with MCV and MCA through the Environmental Priorities Coalition. The EPC picks priority bills every session for the coalition to focus on. MCV, MCA, they manage that coalition, they're the lead in that coalition, so their input is very important. Those priority bills, when you get, as we have been lucky enough to have done, when you get a bill that is a priority bill with the EPC, you get a lot of resources with that partnership.
I think the work that MCV does is incredibly effective. And one of my favorite projects that we do every year is an accountability program, doing the scorecard for all of the state legislators and to report on how the governor's doing. And it's a way for our members to see how their representatives are voting in the State House and how they're doing when it comes to the protection of natural resources here and clean air and clean water, and making sure that we all have the ability to get out in the landscape that we all love to do. And that accountability, I've seen in firsthand how legislators respond to it, and they want to know whether or not the votes that they're taking are going to be scored, and it's a really powerful way to hold members of the legislature accountable.
I'm not one to boast, but I am proud to hold a 100% lifetime score through Maine Conservation Voters environmental scorecards. It's one thing to say that I care about the environment, but my record on environmental bills speaks much louder to my commitment. Constituents want to know where I stand on these vital issues, and they don't always follow my votes. So I appreciate that Maine Conservation Voters offers this effective tool to educate them.
Maine Conservation Voters is one of the most effective environmental groups, we believe, in Maine. It's where Maine's environment and politics comes together, and it's a very effective advocate in the legislature, and it's also a real resource for legislators. A lot of the environmental legislation is complex, and the staff is so knowledgeable and so experienced that they are able to basically reach every legislator in the State House, as well as work with the governor's office.
You look at the advocates who are working at Maine Conservation Voters, and they are showing up every day toggling with that same doubt and fear that all of us have looking ahead at climate action. But what they're choosing to do with that fear is confront it, and they're working with empathy and emotion towards something that's going to work for all of us towards a brighter future, and they're working within the specifics. And I think that's super hard, specific bills and day-to-day and different people from organizations every day giving their energy towards that, and I just have so much respect for that.
I appreciate the fact that they recognize how special Maine is and how important it is to protect our natural environment here in Maine, but I also appreciate the fact that they recognize that it's not just the environment. I've mentioned before kind of the intersectionality of the work. I really appreciate their focus on that. And I appreciate them working to make sure that all of this beautiful land that's before us will be here for future generations to enjoy. And I think that that's really important.
I really appreciate MCV's work because not only is it making the state of Maine a great place to be and continuing to protect our natural resources and make it as appealing as a place one could imagine living. I know that because of the hard work that they're doing now, that my children are going to have the same experience growing up here in Maine. But what I really love about MCV's work is the fact that they make it fun. Oftentimes it's not, it's not super interesting to folks to understand the nuances of policy, and sometimes opposition can be overwhelming and hard to deal with. But they bring this kind of levity and joy to the work that they do that always makes it fun and always keeps people engaged. And I think that's why they've been so successful, and that's why their work continues to grow, and the success of the organization continues to grow. And so I think that's a really great aspect to the Maine Conservation Voters and the work that they do.
That's great. We appreciate those kind words from our friends and colleagues, and we appreciate their and your partnership in this work. Next, we're pleased to share a mother and daughter duo, Penobscot Nation Tribal Ambassador Molly and Dana and her daughter Carmela Bear. They join us from Indian Island to discuss the importance of tribal sovereignty.
The Penobscot River truly is the lifeblood of our people. Our ancestral territory is the islands and the water and really a lot of the state. So, thinking back to our people being riverine people, being sustenance fishing people since time immemorial, the health of the river is just intricately tied to the health and well-being of our people.
From the stories that she would tell me about the river, she wasn't allowed to swim in it, she wasn't allowed to go near it. It was just one of those things like, oh, there it is. Like, that's why we have a bridge. Like, it wasn't like this kind of type of prayer to swim in it. And like, for me now, when I swim in the river, I feel so culturally and physically connected to my ancestors and my land and my home. But for people like my mom and my grandmother, my great-grandmother, they weren't allowed to have that because of the pollution. It just wasn't like a socially acceptable thing.
The 1980 Maine Indian Land Claims Settlement Act was a piece of law that was the result of a lawsuit that essentially was the tribes bringing forth a very valid claim to about 2/3 of the state of Maine that was illegally taken from the tribes because the treaties were never ratified by the federal government. So the settlement that ensued should have really just dealt with land and money. It did those things, but it took it a step further. The state negotiators added in some language that really kind of made Maine this paternalistic figure and have a lot of jurisdictional control over the tribes. And it also blocked the Maine tribes from having access to any federal legislation that should be available to federally recognized tribes. The effort to kind of restore that sovereignty is a large effort to amend that document. And really, this is covering areas like taxation and criminal and civil jurisdiction and land and natural resources, to land acquisition and those federal laws and restoring those. So it's all about fairness and equity and bringing the Maine tribes into a more equal footing with all of the other tribes in the country. The campaign, we are in kind of downtime between legislative years, and we'll be gearing back up for January for LD 1626, which is the large omnibus bill with all of these Settlement Act amendments. And that bill will be going in front of the Judiciary Committee. So right now we are just rallying lawmakers, our allies, our coalition, our tribal citizens and tribal leaders to get a lot of support, a lot of education out there, and to really honor the work of a task force that was convened between tribal leaders and lawmakers that really studied this law in depth and came up with these 22 recommendations. Since I was Carmela's age, I've been an advocate for tribal rights, and in the beginning that really took the form of, fighting stereotypical Indian mascots and changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. And the whole time I was kind of having a front row seat to a lot of these issues. This 1980 Act and sovereignty was this looming thing that was really the undercurrent of all of the struggles and all of the litigation and all of the distrust. So for me, I would love to see a future where we are beyond the fighting with the state of Maine and we are really working together as neighbors. And I think that can only happen when the tribes have that equality, have that respect, and are able to be the capable self-governing nations that we always have been and haven't really had the rights to flex yet.
It's like helping a neighbor. Like, if someone is gonna ask for your help as a decent person, you're gonna help them. Because that's just what humans do. That's what you're supposed to do, is if someone's in need, you help them. So it just makes sense as neighboring communities, like, The island is so close to Old Town, Orono, Bangor. Like, it's not a huge jump to go from that place to another. So as neighboring communities and neighboring towns and people and leaders, they should just be helping each other, because that's just how it should be.
Thank you, Ambassador Dana and Carmela. It's not easy for a teenager to stand up and speak out, and as a fellow mom, I can only imagine how proud Ambassador Dana is of Carmela. Hopefully, we'll pass LD 1626 next year to ensure that the Wabanaki nations have the same rights as the other 570 federally recognized tribes in the United States. Now, up next, we have another powerhouse, Secretary of State Shenna Bellows. She is the first woman to hold this position. And even though she's been in office for less than a year, Secretary Bellows, a woman of action, is wasting no time in making sure that Maine's elections are safe, secure, and accessible. Here she is.
Good evening, democracy champions. The Maine Constitution begins with the same words as the United States Constitution. We, the people. Article 2 of the Maine Constitution states clearly, all power is inherent in the people. But that only has real meaning when all of the people, no matter who you are or where you come from, can participate. Voting rights are fundamental to our democracy. Everything that we care about, from climate change to racial justice, depends upon a healthy democracy. Because when everyone participates, when the promise of we the people is realized, we win. Thank you, each and every one of you who got involved this year to help strengthen our democracy. Maine Conservation Voters was a leader on a number of initiatives to pass legislation here in our state to expand access to the ballot box. All of us should be very proud of what we accomplished. While other states were rolling back voting rights, Maine was rolling out stronger, better voting and election laws. We made voter registration more convenient with the passage of online voter registration. We made voter registration more accessible by allowing young people to use student IDs from Maine colleges and universities to prove identity when they register. We made voting itself more inclusive by passing ongoing absentee voting for seniors and people with disabilities. We made voting more convenient by making permanent absentee ballot drop boxes all across Maine. And we made our elections more secure by passage of funding for ERIC, the Innovative Interstate Collaborative, to check voter registration lists. In 2020, Maine was third in the country in voter participation. More than 75% of Mainers turned out to vote. But we didn't rest on our laurels. In Maine, with the leadership of organizations like Maine Conservation Voters, we worked hard to strengthen our democracy. It's a stark contrast to what's happening all across the country. Make no mistake, our democracy itself is under attack, as 18 states and counting pass voter suppression laws designed to make it harder for people, especially Black and brown people, to vote. We must and we will fight back. We must pass federal standards to bring Maine's great voting practices nationwide. It will take all of us staying engaged and committed to action at the federal level to bring enough pressure to bear to make positive change, to bring about a day when it's not easier to vote in Maine than it is in Mississippi or Georgia or Texas. The late Congressman John Lewis said, "Democracy is not a state. It is an act." He also talked about getting in trouble, good trouble, to have the courage to stand up for what we believe, to fight for a better future for everyone. Let's get in good trouble, my friends.
Thank you, Secretary Bellows, for fighting on the front lines for our democracy, something we know we can't take for granted. Now, Maine's environment and climate change were also front and center this legislative session. The state made incredible progress on some tough challenges because of the leadership of the state Senate, the State House of Representatives, and Governor Mills. Up next are 3 senators who led the way and who received top grades on this year's environmental scorecard: Stacey Brenner, Kathy Breen, and Ann Carney, who were joined at Broad Turn Farm by our Director of Government Affairs, Beth Ahern.
We're here at Broad Turn Farm. This is land that was once the land of the Abenaki Nation, the Pequawket people specifically. The land was conserved with LMF money in 2001. It's 434 acres of preserved land, open with trails, and it is in active agricultural production. It's currently owned by the Scarborough Land Trust, and my business rents from the land trust to run our business and raise our family.
I am most proud of the fact that we were able to refill the Land for Maine's Future Fund. Lands for Maine's Future is a program that started about 30 years ago, and it was aimed at conserving land all over Maine so that we have places to recreate, that we have wildlife habitat, that we have working lands like farms and forests, that we have working waterfronts so that we keep Maine's natural resources available for commercial use and sustainable use and recreation. In the past, LMF has been funded through the issuance of bonds, which means we issue debt and pay it off over time through the general fund. In this case, we had a really robust general fund towards the end of the session, and so we were able to just fund it. We put $40 million in the fund right away. So that money is there already, and it will stay there and as it gets used. So we didn't have to issue any debt, and that's pretty exciting. It's now just a part of our general fund appropriation. Only about 17% right now of Maine's land is conserved, and we need to get to 30% to meet our climate goals. So the Land for Maine's Future program is going to be a key part of that puzzle. And we're going to have to use some state funds, some federal funds, some private funds to continue to conserve land in Maine to meet those goals.
Tribal sovereignty. I feel like that's the most pressing human rights issue in our state right now. So the Tribal Sovereignty Bill reflects a lot of work that was done by a task force to study the relationship between the state of Maine and the Passamaquoddy tribe, the Penobscot Nation, and the Maliseet Band of Indians. And we learned through the task force that Maine's laws really need to be modernized. We have a different relationship with the tribes located within Maine than every other state in the U.S. It will recognize and restore the inherent rights of the tribal nations in Maine, updating things like increasing civil and criminal jurisdiction over certain matters, restoring rights to regulate natural resources, rivers, and other lands within the reservation and trust lands that the tribes have. We held a public hearing on May 4th on that bill. It didn't do a deep dive into the things like criminal and civil jurisdiction. All of those issues now have been worked on over the summer by a group of legislators, but primarily the state and representatives from the tribal nations. And we expect to see some amendments as we reconvene in the second session. And so at this point, we'll definitely, of course, have a work session on the bill where we'll consider amendments. The Juniper Ridge landfill bill is really an effort to bring Juniper Ridge, which is Maine's state-owned landfill, into alignment with the rest of Maine's solid waste laws. Right now, the way our state-owned landfill is being used, it's not consistent with those priorities. We're bringing out-of-state waste into Maine, kind of lightly processing it, but not really fully utilizing the other steps of the hierarchy, the reducing waste, withdrawing elements for recycling. And so what this legislation will do is to kind of align our priorities and how our state-owned landfill is used. The Juniper Ridge loophole is an environmental justice issue because landfills, like any solid waste disposal facility, really dramatically impact the community surrounding them. In the particular case of Juniper Ridge, that the leachate from that landfill is discharged into the Penobscot River, and it significantly affects, among other communities, the Penobscot Nation, where the leachate and discharge is polluting the river and their traditional tribal lands.
I would love to talk to you about extended producer responsibility. This was a fantastic bill that took enormous lift and a great team of folks to put it together and get it across the finish line. Representative Nicole Grahowski was the lead on the bill. The legislation that we passed will create a program. It'll be the first in the country, but it's mirrored on what's going on in the European Union and in all of the Canadian provinces to charge manufacturers of products that come into our state with the cost of disposal of their packaging. The hope with regard to the environmental impact for EPR is that we end up with less waste in the waste stream and more products that are recycled. The benefit to Maine families, to EPR, is that it will reduce the property tax burden for families with regard to covering the municipal waste services in their towns.
That's great. What a wonderful location. Thank you to Senators Breen, Brenner, and Carney for your leadership. We look forward to working with you during the 2022 legislative session. All right, and now let's learn more about our musical guests tonight, the Oshima Brothers. Hello again. So we heard a couple of tracks from you before, and I'm curious, so how did it all begin? Can you tell us sort of how you got started?
Our musical journey began in the woods of Maine. Not much to do but play some music, so that's what we did. And it's continued that way pretty similarly. We dropped out of school, and now this is just what we do all the time. Make videos and make recordings. Live streams is our bread and butter, though.
And what's the best platform? If somebody wants to listen to you live streaming, where do they go?
The best platform actually is tomorrow night. We're playing a live show at Portland House of Music in Portland, Maine. So come, but also you can listen to any streaming music. We like YouTube, Spotify.
All right, that's great. Thank you, guys. So folks, the Oshima Brothers.
We're gonna play a song that I wrote as a love song. I brought it to Jamie and played it to him, and he said, "This sounds very close to a song about climate change." And so we sat down and reworked some of the things. I never thought I'd write a song with the line, "Midwinter summer days, harmless as hand grenades" in it. But here we go. Here's Burning Earth. Jimmy's playing drums with his feet.
Those were the golden days, but look, the gold is great. The shadows and the shade won't be erased. Skywater didn't fall, 6 months is none at all. The headlines hide this, the world's aflame. This burning earth is turning. You are the rain falling on dark nights, golden days. Midwinter summer days, harmless as hand grenades, a manufactured age. Will we escape? My eyes are burning red, your finger points ahead, and underneath the gray, the gold remains. This burning earth is turning. You are the rain falling Those were the golden days, but look, the gold is gray. The shadows and the shade won't be erased. We are just skin and bones. We see and see the earth tones. The world is all aflame.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Sean and Jamie. You guys are awesome. It was really great. Yeah. We'll hear another song from the Oshima Brothers at the end of our program. But now we'd like to take a moment to say thank you to a few special people who are retiring from our boards and have been cornerstones in the building of our organizations. Brigitte Kingsbury has provided steadfast and committed leadership to the organization since 1998. She started on MCV's board, but volunteered to help grow our educational arm, Maine Conservation Alliance, after it was founded in 2001. Brigitte has been a pillar of our organization, helping to increase our size, scope, and sphere of environmental and political influence. And she's also been a friend, checking in on the well-being of staff, cheering us on, and occasionally bringing us treats. She is incredible at bringing new people into our work, including many of you who are here tonight. I will always be grateful for the way she welcomed and supported me over the years. Thank you truly and dearly, Brigitte.
Thank you, Brigitte. If anyone can match Brigitte in environmental passion, dedication, leadership, and longevity, it's Dan Amory. Over the last 2 decades, Dan has helped grow MCV from a group of volunteers that published an environmental scorecard to the political powerhouse it is today. Dan has served in almost every MCV board leadership position, twice as president and most recently as treasurer. Dan has embraced the growth of the organization while insisting on fiscal prudence, intellectual rigor, and good governance. Both Dan and Brigitte would be the first ones to support a needed position, idea, or project, giving generously of their time, resources, and feedback. This support came from a deep commitment to the protection of Maine's environment and climate future, and a belief in the power of democracy and advocacy to make change. Dan, words cannot do justice in expressing how grateful we are for your years of dedicated leadership and service. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dan. John Piatti is a more recent MCV board member, having joined in 2014. We could always count on his political insight and advice, having served in the Maine House of Representatives for 8 years, including as House Majority Leader. As Executive Director of Maine Farmland Trust and President and CEO of American Farmland Trust, John also brought an important agricultural perspective to MCV's work on climate change and the environment. Thank you, John, for helping us make Maine's environment a political priority.
Thank you, Brigitte, Dan, and John, for all of your work with MCA and MCV. Next, I'm honored to welcome Governor Janet Mills, who has kept us healthy and safe during this pandemic, putting Maine on the road to recovery and planning ahead for a sustainable future. Governor Mills told the world at the United Nations that Maine won't wait on climate change, and she's showing that climate change is a priority for her administration every day.
Hello, this is Governor Janet Mills. I wish I could be with you in person, but I want to thank the Maine Conservation voters for transitioning to this virtual event instead in order to protect the public health during this COVID-19 pandemic. As we put the full force of our will and our wallets behind protecting lives and livelihoods, we have not forgotten that other public health crises still loom large. International scientists have called the trajectory of climate change a code red for humanity. We've heard that warning and many others before it, loud and clear. 2 years ago, I spoke to the United Nations General Assembly and I told them when it comes to climate change, Maine won't wait. And in 2020, even while fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, Maine did not wait to act. We released Maine Won't Wait, our 4-year climate action plan from the Maine Climate Council. This plan puts us on a path to meet our aggressive carbon emission reduction and clean energy goals. The plan also details the steps we want to take to create economic opportunities for Maine, encouraging the growth of clean energy jobs, increasing incentives for consumer, business, and industry to invest in energy efficiency and electrification. and supporting sustainable construction materials and agricultural systems to build and feed the state into the future. The plan also highlights strategies to ensure our communities are better prepared for the increasing impacts of climate change, from rising sea levels to more frequent weather events. Informed by the findings of the Maine Climate Council, I announced a series of actions to respond to the climate crisis and to protect Maine people and the environment, while also creating new pathways for economic growth. In the coming years, we will more than double Maine's clean energy and energy efficiency jobs to 30,000. We will double the pace of home weatherization. We'll expand incentives for purchasing electric vehicles, and we'll build more EV charging stations across the state. We'll support public transportation and housing efforts that will have the effect of reducing travel overall. We'll purchase more renewable energy through the state procurement process, and we'll ensure that state buildings and facilities lead by example. Maine people and businesses are already benefiting from these actions. New renewable energy projects are creating construction jobs along with clean energy. Heat pumps are being installed at a record pace, reducing heating bills for hardworking Maine families. National companies are investing in new technologies here, including energy storage, tidal and floating offshore wind, attracting new talent and capital to Maine. We must continue this progress. In partnership with the legislature, we enacted significant investments under the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan, which is, of course, my proposal to use funding from the Federal American Rescue Plan to support our families and get our economy back on track. Using more than $40 million in federal funds, the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan will provide grants to build more resilient infrastructure, to expand access to reliable shared transportation, to reduce carbon emissions, increase the number of electric vehicle charging stations, and create a matching grant program to support electricity grid upgrades to reduce barriers for economic development for new or struggling businesses. We're also investing $50 million in weatherization and efficiency programs. We will weatherize nearly 18,000 homes per year and help communities, businesses, and schools move to energy efficiency technology to cut both costs and carbon emissions. We also made the largest investment ever in the Land for Maine's Future since 1999. LMF has conserved some 2 million acres of working forests and guaranteed public access to Maine's most precious places. With $40 million of state funding, not bonded, general appropriations funds, we'll redouble our efforts to protect the forests, farms, and coastal marshes that we know are crucial to our climate fight. And with your support, we worked with the legislature to enact significant environmental and energy legislation this year. We banned high-polluting chemicals used for air conditioning, refrigeration, and other applications. We adopted science-based sea level rise projections into Maine law. We created a healthy soils program at the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry to promote climate-friendly agricultural practices. We provided $25 million to improve public drinking water systems and mitigate lead in drinking water at schools and daycare facilities. We provided $22 million of investments in municipal wastewater infrastructure to reduce pollution in Maine's waters, reduce the burden of maintenance for local ratepayers, and support local construction jobs. We provided $3 million for a small community grant program to repair and replace old septic systems to reduce water pollution and protect public health. We provided $3 million to improve fish passage through a competitive grant program that matches local funding to upgrade municipal culverts at stream crossings. And we provided $30 million to mitigate threats posed by the forever chemicals known as PFAS, affecting agricultural producers in the state and our food supply. Over the course of the last 18 months, we've looked to science to slow the spread of a deadly disease. And we will continue to look to science and rely on science when it comes to the warming of the planet. As we study the science, though, whether confronting the pandemic or the dangers of climate change, we still look to nature for peace as well. We take refuge in the woods and waters of our state. We find comfort in navigating the rough waves around our islands. We troll the quiet wood-bordered streams for trout. We are healed by our state's vast natural resources, and we remember the words of Governor Joshua Chamberlain, who proclaimed 150 years ago that, quote, "They will love the land, and the land will give back strength." And there do we get our strength. Chamberlain and I aren't the only ones who think so either. For the third consecutive year, attendance at our state parks hit a record high. As of August 31st, day use was up 11%, and camping was up more than 16%. So to preserve our parks, we'll make the most meaningful infrastructure investment in decades, providing $50 million in federal funding to update park roads, bridges, shelters, and staff housing. This progress would not have been possible without you, people who are devoted to the preservation of this special place we call Maine. As always, you have a committed partner in my administration. I thank each and every one of you for your commitment to the environment and to climate action. With your leadership, we can confidently say that Maine won't wait. Thank you for what you do, what you have done, and what you will do in advance, and what you continue to do. Thank you, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Governor Mills, for the incredible progress you've made on climate change. We appreciate your leadership. Now, art and poetry are essential parts of reaching people's souls, framing our challenges and reflecting the light and hope within humanity with just a few words or brushstrokes or musical notes. Our next speaker brings strength and inspiration to the environmental movement through poetry. I am delighted to introduce author, poet, and activist Gary Lawless, who joins us from the banks of the Damariscotta Lake.
Two poems from Damariscotta Lake. Do the loons tell their children stories of this lake? Do the stones remember the glaciers? In the clay, clamshells from 10,000 years, do they dream of the ocean? Do we remember the time before there were stars, before there was light? When the animals come to us asking for our help, will we know what they are saying? When the plants speak to us in their delicate, beautiful language, will we be able to answer them? When the planet herself sings to us in our dreams, will we be able to wake ourselves and act?
Moving words from a beautiful spot and a reminder to wake ourselves and act. Thank you, Gary. Speaking of action, we have a huge opportunity at the federal level to pass climate action through the Build Back Better Act. Our next speaker spends most of her time at our nation's capital making sure that any final climate legislation cuts our carbon pollution in half by 2030. Please welcome Sarah Schifo, Vice President of Government Affairs at the National League of Conservation Voters.
I'm Sarah Schifo, and I am Vice President of Government Affairs at the League of Conservation Voters. I want to start by thanking our incredible partners at Maine Conservation Voters. The work you do fighting every day for a healthy climate, clean energy, clean air and water, and justice and good jobs is simply extraordinary. We feel very lucky to be your partner. And a big thank you to everyone joining today's important event and for being such a core part of this work. Together, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make transformational change in this country. As Mainers know too well, the climate crisis is unrelenting. From the Code Red report from international climate experts to devastating extreme weather that has impacted nearly 1 in 3 people this summer, to long-standing environmental injustice, it is clear that we are living in a now or never moment. Now is the moment for Congress to act on climate at the scale science and justice require. Congress must pass the Build Back Better Act with the investments that cut our country's carbon pollution in half by 2030 and protect communities from future devastation. These investments build upon and support Governor Mills' bold climate action plan. We need to confront enduring injustices, which means our approach to cutting carbon pollution must be done in a way that builds a more fair and just society. That's why the Build Back Better Act must direct 40% of investment benefits to to the low-income communities and communities of color most harmed by toxic pollution. This means investing in the health, economic vitality, and workforce of these communities. This is what justice requires. We also have the chance to create good-paying union jobs and unleash a manufacturing renaissance in this country driven by the clean energy transformation, starting with offshore wind right here in Maine. To seize this opportunity, we've been running our largest advocacy campaign ever, in deep partnership with Maine conservation voters and our state partners across the country. The reception to this campaign has been simply overwhelming. Together, we have put climate at the forefront of the Build Back Better Act, and support for bold climate action is a unifying priority across the ideological spectrum of the Democratic caucus. With our state affiliates like Maine conservation voters, we are calling on Congress to meet the moment and pass the climate test. And we're not alone. We're joined by environmental justice leaders, labor unions, young people, students, state and local officials, and the private sector. Because together, and only together, we can get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for being such a great partner and for everything you're doing to bring home federal climate legislation. Everyone has a why, a motive for doing what they do. Next, we'll hear from another mother-daughter duo, 1st District Representative Shelley Pingree and her daughter Hannah, who heads the government's Office of Policy Innovation in the Future. We'll hear them discuss the reasons why they fight for climate action.
Hello, my name is Hannah Pingree, and I'm here with my mom, Shelley Pingree, and we just want to thank you all for showing up tonight for Maine League of Conservation Voters. We are huge fans of the work that they do and so appreciative of all of the volunteers and the board members and everyone else who is trying to work so hard on behalf of our environment. So my mom and I decided to kind of change it up a little bit this afternoon. We are out in the woods on North Haven with the dog, and we are going to play a quick game of not 20 questions, but 3 questions on climate. So I get to kick it off, and the first question, she has a very short time to answer, is, Mom, what is your favorite climate solution?
Agriculture, absolutely. Most people don't understand how much carbon you can sequester in the soil. We all think about trees, but don't forget, we can sequester a lot of the carbon that we have in the atmosphere in the soil, and I'm working on it right now.
Awesome. Now you
my
ask
question.
me.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, Mom.
Hey, what climate issue makes you the most excited?
Okay, I won't go full nerd, but I would say solutions that give people good paying jobs. I think we're working really hard to do that in Maine. I also am a big fan of heat pumps. They save people money. They're good for the environment. They're great for the climate. And we've got thousands of people installing them all over Maine. So get a heat pump.
Great. Your turn.
All right, Mom, what is the dumbest thing anyone in DC has said on climate, and what was your reaction?
Oh my gosh, the list is so long. But my favorite was a couple of years ago, sitting at the airport. 2 of my colleagues are just sitting a little ways away from me, and one starts explaining to the other one why wind towers and windmills are actually the cause of the climate heating. He said, and he explained this in detail, the wind hits the windmill, it takes away all of the wind, and so on the other side, it's very hot, and that is why the planet is heating up. And I just said to him, seriously, you really believe that?
Oh, man. All right. Now you ask me.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, I get to spend a lot of time with your kids, and I know what they say to me about climate change, but what do you think they think about climate change?
I would say my 2 kids, Elsie and Oscar, are hardcore climate advocates. They mostly say to me, why am I not doing more? And I'm like, I'm trying. I'm doing as much as I can. But I would say for an 8 and 10-year-old, they care a lot and they expect a lot of us.
And I think that's true of a lot of 8 and 10-year-olds worrying about their future. But go ahead, your turn.
All right.
Last one.
Last question. Mom, why do you care so much about this issue?
Well, I personally have cared about it my whole life, but the fact is, for me, I got grandchildren, I got children. I do not want to leave this planet and the state it's about to be in if we don't do something about it. So that's what keeps me up at night, making sure that my grandchildren have a future.
Yep. And I can't add much more to that. I mean, the answer are my kids care a lot. The entire future of this beautiful place we live really is about what we do in the next 10 years. So I am trying as hard as I can, and I care, and I'm really grateful
for all the people who care as well. And thank you to everybody again there tonight. Thank you for including us. We work hard at these things, but we couldn't do it without all of you. Thank you to Governor Mills, who's just doing an amazing job about this. My good friend Bill McKibben, who I know is speaking and has made a huge difference already. So keep up the good work, and thanks for including us.
Maine is incredibly lucky to have the leadership of Shelley and Hannah, and I am grateful for their partnership in this work. Climate change can seem like an overwhelming problem to tackle. Where do you start? Well, one talented Mainer is turning climate data into moving works of art. Her beautiful paintings have garnered national recognition, including a front cover feature on Time magazine. Here's Portland artist and scientist, Jill Pelto.
The data art, I first came up with that idea in 2015. I do field work every summer with my dad in Washington State. The drought, the forest fires, the lack of snow on the glaciers, like all of these things were really, really bad that year, and it was really emotional and personal for me to see. I really wanted to find a way to communicate what I had just seen with people in Maine who weren't experiencing those same forms of climate change at that time. Watercolor, I've always really loved as a media. I think that's why I chose it, and that a lot of it was developed from, again, like doing the science research, because I would bring supplies with me when I went to these places, and it had to be something that could be small. And I think I love painting. It's hard, that'd be harder to do with other forms of paint. So as a result, I would bring watercolor paints, and I think I just got the most comfortable with it, could express myself the best with it, and have continued to use that. To finish a whole painting, I would say it usually takes me at least a few months, and it also depends on how easily do I find the type of data I'm looking for, or if it's a collaboration, I might be learning from the researchers about what they want me to show, and just deciding in that planning stage is usually the hardest part for me. I've been fortunate in working towards doing this full time, so I've been having a lot more online or physical features that have been helping me a lot. And the biggest example so far is this cover I did for Time magazine, which was last year in July 2020. And so every year Time does a climate change entire themed issue in July. And so that's how they found out about my work. And for the cover, I have all different global data. I didn't want it to be just a story of the United States. And so just quickly, I have sea level rise. I have decreasing land ice over time. I have increasing global renewable energy with the trees. The yellow area is increasing global temperature. And then the gray area is increasing use of fossil fuels for the world. But you do have that slight decrease at the end, and that's due to COVID changes. I want people to feel something emotionally, but I definitely don't always want that to be a sadness over climate change necessarily. I think sometimes I want people to see the reality of wow, this is how much sea level rise has happened, this is how much is predicted, things like that. But I want people to have something that helps inform them, but really have that emotional kind of connection to what I'm trying to show. And that's what I'm trying to use the visuals of my art to do. And so I'm trying to be more conscious going forward, and have been, of including data that also is more neutral or more positive, what are actions that people, the communities are taking around this as well. So there's more of that response that people have as well, and they feel oh, I can see this future, see something that can work.
Happy evening, everyone. How amazing is Jill Pelto? I'm Francesca, Communications Manager here at MCA and MCV. And I got my start in the climate movement with my college's fossil fuel divestment campaign, calling on my college to stop investing in fossil fuels and reinvest into climate solutions. And after 8 years of campaigning, my college recently announced that they will be officially divesting. And this year, Maine became the very first state in the country to divest from fossil fuels. MCV can't take credit for this victory, and we thank climate groups, Maine Youth for Climate Justice, Maine Climate Action Now, Sierra Club Maine, and 350 Maine for leading the way. And we thank Representative Maggie O'Neill for bringing this legislation forward. Our final speaker for tonight was integral to the divestment movement's inception and success. Here is author, educator, environmentalist, founder of 350.org and Third Act, Bill McKibben.
Friends, this is Bill McKibben. What a pleasure to get to join you all and to just say congratulations at the end of this year and the end of this evening for all the work that's gotten done. Of course, we watch Maine closely because as Maine goes, and that's why it was such great news, for instance, that all of you working together managed to build this big coalition to get divestment done there in the state legislature. Couldn't have made me happier to see people at work and to watch Maine Youth for Climate Justice, and Climate Action Now, and the Sierra Club, and 350, and you guys really pushing together to make important change happen. There's so much going on up there now. This Our Power campaign around utilities and all of that. I hope that it's allowing you to deal with all the bad climate news with at least a certain understanding that we're deeply engaged in this fight, that we're finally beginning to get traction, that we have the tools, especially in the form of cheap renewable energy and a growing understanding of how to put it to work, that might make the rest of this decade decisively important. Not easy, because as we can tell just watching Joe Manchin in Washington, the fossil fuel industry always is using its tool, which is huge amounts of cash to bend and warp our political process. So we've got to use our tool, which is lots and lots of people. And we have to make sure that organized people beat organized money. It is so good to know that there are lots of places on the map where there are people who are doing that kind of remarkable work, chief among them Maine. I got to say, my last trip out, I think, before the pandemic was a blissful few days of skiing on that hut-to-hut system out there in the western part of the state. And I cannot wait to get back. And I will do everything I can to make sure that at the very least there's snow on the ground for us to enjoy in the years ahead. Thank you all so much for being a big, big part of this big fight.
Maureen, the first time I met you was at the 2007 Evening for the Environment when Bill McKibben was our keynote speaker. It feels like things have come full circle.
They sure have, Adam. And I love that we're back together with Bill McKibben once again.
And that's our show. We hope you enjoyed hearing from all of our wonderful speakers and performers this evening. We certainly had a great time. Thank you to the Oshima brothers for performing tomorrow night. And a big thanks to the great staff, boards, event planning committee, videographer Johnny Mueller, and Broadturn Farm for the beautiful flowers.
Thanks to all of you who tuned in this evening to celebrate with us, for being part of our community, and for supporting the work of MCA and MCV. Be well, stay safe, and keep fighting for climate action.
Cheers.
Cheers.
We were drinking in the cabin, middle of the summer, and you told me we'd be friends forevermore. We were running through the wildwood, and oh, how I remember all the times you laughed and finished my sentences. We stayed up till the morning light, the songs I made up under the summer sky. We stayed up till the morning light, talking about the girls in bed. You and me foolishly wanna be getting old. When we stayed up till the morning light, talking about the girls in bed. These days are